There's a possible breakthrough for peace in Ukraine today. The president has announced early elections and a new coalition government.
That move comes after battles between police and protesters killed more than 70 people and injured hundreds more. Mark Martin has the story.
A man sweeps the street while protesters stand peacefully on Independence Square in Kiev. One protester holds a cross. It's a sharp contrast from the bloodshed that took place Thursday. The violence between government police and protesters left at least 70 members of the opposition and 3 police officers dead. More than 500 protesters were injured and nearly 30 police officers suffered gunshot wounds.
I believe that the 20th of February will go down in the Ukrainian history as one of the saddest days ever since independence.
This protester says, "We want to say that they need to stop all this. Enough of the blood. How much has been spilled already? Only yesterday, more than 75 people have lost lives." For now, his call for peace appears to have come true after all-night negotiations with EU diplomats. The government agreed to form a new coalition government in 10 days and hold new elections by the end of the year. The document also promises constitutional reforms to scale back presidential powers, which is a key demand of protesters. Steve Weber of CBN Ukraine says the church has not been sitting on the sidelines.
The church is right in the middle and asking God's protection, for restraint, for God's peace. That's one level the church is doing. The other one is that many of the churches have opened up that are near Maidan to be temporary hospitals.
Demonstrators have camped for 3 months on Independence Square. The president sparked the protests by doing away with a pact with the European Union in favor of close ties with Russia. But the people's dissatisfaction goes deeper than that. Weber says they're tired of being ruled by lawless and corrupt leaders. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Well, reporter George Thomas is with us. He just recently returned from assignment in Ukraine. And George, what do you think of this? Are these concessions by the president enough to satisfy the protesters?
I was talking to my colleague who is on Independence Square this morning just a few minutes ago, and she said she was talking to a protester, and he said in essence to us, he said, "This is just another piece of paper. We will not leave the barricades until Viktor Yanukovych steps down." Look, this is a man who, according to this protester, has blood on his hands. Dozens of people have died in just the last month alone, and this does not solve the deeper issues that are plaguing the society. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
Let's talk about it now. Explain it to us. It's hard for me to understand how a trade agreement with the European Union launches this kind of activity. What's the underlying
Look, I think that was the initial crisis when it started in November. But then how the government responded to protesters saying, listen, we want closer ties with the European Union. The moment that Viktor Yanukovych reneged on this multi-billion-dollar deal for closer ties with the European Union, demonstrators went out on the street saying, look, this is not right. And the police beat them up. And this sparked the crisis that you're seeing today, because at the root of this situation is that they are tired, after 1991, gaining independence from the former Soviet Union. They're saying, we don't want to continue the policies of Moscow, of the Kremlin. We don't want to see, we don't want to see a lack of human rights, a lack of freedom, the ability to go out on the streets and demonstrate and protest against our government. We don't live in Russia. This is Ukraine. And so at the bottom, yes, listen, half the country is divided. You've got the eastern part that is pro-Russian, the western side that is pro-West. In essence, they want closer ties. But, at the heart, this is also about corrupt leaders. Corruption permeates the entire society.
Well, let me defend Russia. If Putin were to kill people in the streets of Moscow, I think you'd see the same protest.
Absolutely. And you know what? This is what Vladimir Putin is scared to death of. He has told Viktor Yanukovych, listen, he in fact has referred to these tens of thousands of Ukrainians on the streets of Kiev as terrorists. He says, you've got to get a handle of these guys. Because why? You see, Russia, Vladimir Putin a number of years ago said the following. He said, the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the century. He looks at Ukraine as little Russia. He sees no border between Russia and Ukraine. And so he wants Ukraine to be part of the orbit. And when he sees his influence, political as well as economic, look, a few weeks ago, he gave Ukrainians a $15 billion, in essence, what I call a bribe. 3 days ago, he offered them an extra $2 billion. He wants them to stay in his orbit. The Ukrainians are saying no. It doesn't mean that they're not, they don't have affiliation and a connection with Russia. They just don't want to continue this tutelage of corrupt courts, corruption, and this brutality that they see in Russia. And this is exactly why Putin is afraid. Because if these guys can go out on the streets, lose lives, let me tell you this. 70-some people, I'm not quite sure the exact figures, yesterday lost their
75
lives. They are back on the streets today. Mothers, children, young and old. I saw them. I spent days with them on the barricades on the front line. Gordon, these are ordinary folks, doctors, engineers, carpenters, teachers. I saw mothers, elderly mothers in their 70s or 80s. Okay. Our viewers may be a little upset about that, but they were one of these babushkas. They were out there with trays of food, hot cups of tea, giving these protesters food and rest. And these are folks, ordinary folks.
What's the church doing in the middle of this? I don't think a lot of people know. One of the largest congregations.
Picture right here of a woman who is handing out Psalm 91 to the protests, to the demonstrators, people who are praying on the center of the day. The church sees this as an incredible opportunity. We have historical evidence that when in the midst of political revolutions, whether it's Tiananmen Square in 1989 in China, whether it's Iran or the former Soviet Union, in the midst of these incredible political changes, people are looking for hope. They're looking for, they think maybe it's politics, but in the end, they're searching, can something give me hope to bring me the peace that I'm so longing for in my country, where I can be free?
You're going back, right?
I am.
Are you
in a few hours.
You sound really excited about that.
I am.
Are you going to be a protester?
I'm not going to pick up. Do you want me? That can be part of my job description. I can be a rock thrower for CBN News. No. Listen, this is my heart cry. I've spent days on the barricades, on the front line, and this is a moment I want to go and tell the story of what the church is doing. You know, today I read a report. People are telling me that doctors, Christian doctors and nurses are in churches. Churches have turned into hospitals for the wounded and the injured, and they're there. They're ministering to people because this is the body of Christ. In the moment, in the midst of this moment in the nation of the history of this nation, the church is armed. Steve Weber there with our team in Ukraine, 20 years they've been ministering the gospel. He says we've got to pray for righteous leaders who don't have their own personal agenda at stake, but they want the agenda of the people to move forward.
Well, that's a prayer for all of us, and so be praying for the peace of Kiev, for the peace of Ukraine. It is a Christian country. There are lots of Christians on both sides here, and we need to pray that there would be peace. Well, here at home, there's a growing concern that Big Brother may soon show up in the newsroom. John Jessup has more on that story from Washington. John?
Gordon, that's right. Conservatives and some media analysts are speaking out against a plan from the Federal Communications Commission they say could lead to Big Brother monitoring the media. The FCC plans to investigate how newsrooms decide which stories to report. Critics say this could lead to government regulation and control of news stories, which violates the First Amendment guarantee of a free press. The FCC chairman says the commission does not plan to restrict freedom of the press. A Republican commissioner on the FCC first brought the plan to light. You can read his column and some critics' responses by going to cbnnews.com. Australian officials say they have no details of the location or condition of a 75-year-old missionary arrested in North Korea. Police took John Short into custody Monday morning. No one has seen him since. He's accused of handing out Christian literature in the communist country. Jeff King, the president of International Christian Concern, says Short's arrest may have more to do with a recent UN report accusing North Korea of committing crimes against humanity.
The man who headed up the commission for the UN was an Australian. He's an Australian judge. So we think the angle is that this is punishment and it's a bargaining chip. That's conjecture, but it certainly looks interesting, and it looks like an overbearing response to, a small offense.
Well, churches and religious groups have already bought almost 500,000 tickets to the upcoming movie Son of God. The film comes out next weekend. It's produced by Mark Burnett and Roma Downey. They also produced last year's hit series on the History Channel, The Bible. The Hollywood Reporter says that some groups have already rented theaters and even entire multiplexes. The report says Liberty University bought out a multiplex where the movie will be showing on all 14 screens on opening day next Friday. And Compassion International bought 225,000 tickets in 40 cities. We'll have a special report on the movie on next Friday's 700 Club. Computerized traffic monitoring systems will soon be able to watch virtually every aspect of life in big cities. Fast Company reports that computer giant Cisco has announced an agreement with a Swiss security firm, AGT, to develop those high-tech traffic systems for cities around the world. The systems will include sensors in pavement, video cameras, the ability to read license plates, and even feeding information into social media. The idea is to quickly help identify and resolve traffic problems. The magazine says some people may find the system a bit creepy, but it adds, nevertheless, it's part of a much larger trend in which city, state, and federal agencies use sensors to monitor the smallest aspects of everyday urban life. And Gordon, it's really the same situation here that we've been reporting, balancing privacy concerns against convenience.
Well, John, I'm one of the ones that think this is a little bit creepy when you can identify. I'm fine with a traffic monitoring system to help road planners, help police clear up accidents, those kinds of things. All that's wonderful. But when you start tying the data down to an individual license plate, individual car, and then the capacity to store that information literally forever, you're going to be able to track the movement of every American from now on. And I find that very disturbing. We can all embrace an Internet of Things, but start understanding that when the items in your household start talking to the Internet and the government is listening, do you really want the NSA knowing the milk in your refrigerator is getting ready to expire? That's the kind of detail the government is going to have on all of us. And for just privacy concerns, that I don't want the government knowing that, the freedom to have spoiled milk, if you will. Why are we allowing this kind of thing? And no one seems to be protesting. Nobody seems to be really getting excited about what the NSA is doing. We're all buying the lie that somehow or other this is stopping terrorism. And we've already had the report. All the NSA metadata collection of all our phone records, all our emails, all our text messages hasn't led to a single case of stopping terrorism. That ought to be enough for all of us to wake up and say, this needs to stop.
Another Democratic Attorney General has announced she will not defend a state ban on gay marriage. This time it's Oregon's Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum. Democratic attorneys general in at least 5 other states have taken the same step, even though it's their responsibility to defend state laws in court. Rosenblum says Oregon's ban cannot withstand a federal constitutional challenge, so she's not going to try. Last year, she joined U.S. Supreme Court briefs arguing it was unconstitutional to deny gays the right to marry. Operation Blessing is supporting the work against human trafficking in Nepal. OB is working with the Nepali Rescue Project and supporting a border station between India and Nepal. Trained staff intervene and rescue victims before they are trafficked across the border. The girls are taken to safe homes where they receive counseling and even skills training them to help them reintegrate into their communities. Many young girls are targeted by traffickers and lured in by the promise of work. So Operation Blessing is also working in villages, offering training and vital resources. And you can find out more about Operation Blessing by going to their website at ob.org.